Greetings, SPRC. This is just a quick little video message I'm creating because sometimes it's easier for me to talk than to precisely parse out all of my words in writing. And I just want to cover a few things that we're going to be doing and are doing constantly together as we lead the church. First off, let me say a word about your job and how extensive it is and why it's a challenge. You might say that with regards to our existing staff, you have three responsibilities. The first is to support the staff and do what you can to help them to do their jobs, see to it that they are treated fairly and compensated fairly. The second job is to hold staff accountable for making a reasonable effort and in some cases to improve the work that they're doing when this can benefit the church. So on the one hand you want to support, on the other hand you want to hold people accountable. And that's a lot to do, particularly for a team of 9 volunteers who are overseeing 9 staff members, even with the help of the pastor. Now the third thing though you have to do is you have to obey various governmental laws as and when they apply to church and staff relationships. And that's a sort of rough thing because that involves knowing what laws are, knowing what they say, and also making allowances for when the rules for a church may in some cases be different than the rules for secular employment. Which brings me to the next thing. We touched on a conversation at our last meeting about the Fair Labor Standards Act and the difference between exempt employees, non-exempt employees, and people who are covered by something called the ministerial exception. Now let me just share this real briefly with you, and I was going to say something sooner, but I've been communicating with other church leaders to make sure we're all on the same place so that we're not conflicting with each other. And pretty solid with what I'm going to say now, real solid. So number one, there's something called the Fair Labor Standards Act. And if an employee or staff member is non-exempt and is covered by the Fair Labor Standards Act, they are, and all of this is a little oversimplified, but they're basically almost always paid an hourly wage that must be at least equal to minimum wage, and if they work more than 40 hours a week, they are then entitled to overtime pay at least 1.5 times their regular rate. That's a non-exempt staff member or employee. But then you have exempt employees who, by virtue of the nature of the job they do and by the fact that they're paid significantly at a higher rate than minimum wage, they may be paid salaried, which means you just give them a certain amount every week and you expect them to work the hours it takes to complete the job. So you don't have to pay a salaried worker overtime as a general rule if their hours go over. Now, by the way, that's convenient for us as a church because we want to treat all of our staff members fairly, but in church work, as in many other jobs, sometimes your hours fluctuate because of the tasks that must be completed and the people you're working with. So Kelly Voorhees, when she's leading a mission trip, is going to work a lot more than 40 hours a week, and we won't be able to say, but you can make it up by taking it easier the next week and your salary is going to even out. It's a lot of work to track people on an hourly basis in some jobs. Now those are the two basic positions that are covered under Fair Labor Standards Act, which are non-exempt, you must get overtime, and exempt, you don't have to because you already get paid more. But then there's a third category called the ministerial exception. And that means that if you work in a church, then the Fair Labor Standards Act, basically in terms of compensation, does not apply to you at all if you are doing what can be termed ministry. Now that would cover Pastor Stephanie and myself, but it would also cover people whose primary jobs involve the propagation of our basic Christian message. Now this means You don't have to pay ministers minimum wage, and you don't have to meet the government's minimum standard for a salary for them either. You simply have to pay them whatever they agree to take, and then they're going to work for as long as the two of you work it out. Now, there's one more point to this you must understand. We still have a Christian and in many ways wise economic interest in paying people covered by the ministerial exception fairly. The fact the Fair Labor Standards Act does not apply to people involved in Christian ministry who are working for a Christian ministry does not mean we can treat them like dirt or we can do whatever we want. There are other standards that come from God that are more important. So that's a second thing I just wanted to touch base on, and I have now sent to you a copy, and then there's notes in the email to you, a little copy of where this is being discussed in brief by the General Counsel on Finance and Administration of the United Methodist Church. But also, Darla Nelson, Laura Mick, and myself sat in on a free conference call with a lawyer, and he was talking about these very things. Now, one more thing real quick. We're about to hire an administrative assistant. I've been talking to Laura Mick. We've gotten resumes, and I want to say there's 3 ways of evaluating here. Number 1, read the resumes. And number 2, we're going to have 2 interviews. Now, the first interview is going to be mainly me, but Pastor Stephanie will be there too. And basically, I just want to talk to this person and make sure I feel there's enough of a connection work-wise that we could work together. I'm not don't want to choose the person we hire, but I want to maybe say if there's a definite alarm that I pick up, we probably veto them. I've done that in the past, and I've never vetoed anyone at this point yet, but it's a good preliminary thing because this person will be working with me very directly in the office. Then the third step is, and I'll be there for this, but I'm not going to do most of the talking. You guys are going to interview the candidates, and you guys are going to make the call. So again, you have the resumes. And by the way, if someone sent in a terrible resume, I would trust Laura Mick to say, we're not going to interview this person. We don't have time. We're just not under consideration. I'd be cool. Then the next step is, as I said, I'm going to interview the person. Pastor Stephanie should be there. And if we see any real red flags, we'll let you know, and we'll want you to veto them. Hopefully that won't happen. But then the third step is you guys do interview. You guys and gals, you do interview. And you make the choice based on that. And I'm going to respect whatever choice you guys make. Anyway, that's what I wanted to share with you today. It was easier than trying to write out a whole letter. Winging it is easier sometimes. So I'm going to attach this video to an email along with a link to a video about the ministerial exception and the Fair Labor Standards Act that I want you all to watch at least the brief part about the ministerial exception. And if you want to watch the whole thing about the Fair Labor Standards Act, that would be okay too. Anyway, thank you for all you do. Because being on the SPRC, especially when you have a staff this size, is a lot of work. And you can't realistically do it all. So I'm just going to encourage you and me as we work together as a team to get done the stuff that matters the most, to get done the stuff that needs to be done especially, and to make sure we do a good job with that. Take care. God bless. Goodbye.